The moment her laughter cut off and turned into a whisper, I knew something was wrong. It was one of those late summer evenings when the air gets thick and everything feels heavier than it should. I was standing barefoot in the hallway, holding her laptop charger, the one she frantically asked me to grab before I left for the store. The front door was ajar. I was supposed to be gone already. I didn't plan to stop. I didn't plan to hear anything. But I froze the second I heard her say, "I can't fake it anymore." "Hi, I don't love him." I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. The next thing out of her mouth, a giggle. Not the kind that slips out accidentally, the kind that oozes relief. She was sitting in our kitchen sipping iced tea with her sister. It's the same kitchen where we used to dance at midnight just because our song came on shuffle. The same place where she cried when we lost the baby. The same place I kissed her forehead 1,000 times and thought I was kissing someone who meant it back. "I don't know why I'm still here," she said. "Maybe guilt. Just feel bad for him." My fingers clenched around the charger. It's not because I was angry, because that sentence, it confirmed a suspicion I'd been too cowardly to say out loud. I was a burden, not a partner, not a husband, a project she had no energy left to finish. I backed away without a sound, quietly left the charger on the stairs. She never noticed. She texted me an hour later. "Thanks, babe." I didn't reply. I spent that night pacing. I tried to convince myself it was a heat-of-the-moment thing. Maybe. She didn't mean it. Maybe she was venting. People vent, right? But deep down I knew that wasn't venting. It was truth finding the nearest exit. For the next 6 days I played the role of loving husband like my life depended on it. I made breakfast, kissed her goodbye before work, sent her playlists. I asked about her meetings, and every time she smiled back, I saw something hollow behind her eyes, something I now realized had been there for years. The 7th night, I said 6 words I never thought I'd say. "I think we should end it." She blinked, didn't even look shocked. All she said was, "Okay? No fight? No why? Just okay." Like she'd been waiting for me to say it so she wouldn't have to. The silence after that was louder than any argument we ever had. I packed that night, left quietly. No drama, no speech. It's just my toothbrush, my books, and one suitcase of clothes she hadn't picked out for me. I disappeared. For 3 years, I stayed gone. And then last Friday, while I was picking up takeout, I turned around in line. And there she was, wearing the same necklace I gave her on our 5th anniversary, holding a toddler and staring at me like she'd just seen a ghost. But what she said next, that changed everything. I didn't speak first. I couldn't. My mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. I just stood there in that narrow, overlit corner of that Thai place as the woman who used to be my whole world. Stood 5 feet away holding a child on her hip, looking at me like I was the one who vanished without warning. She looked older, not in a bad way, just worn. Her eyes had a different weight to them, like she had finally started carrying things she used to avoid. And that toddler, a girl with the exact same curl in her hair Trina used to tuck behind her ear when she was nervous, clung to her shoulder, blinking up at me like I was a stranger who'd walked into the wrong dream. She said my name soft, like it might hurt her if she said it too loud. "Emery?" I blinked. I was frozen. Around us seemed to notice anything. The guy behind the counter kept calling out numbers like nothing was happening. But for me, time fractured. 3 years collapsed into a single second. I finally managed hey. It was all I could say. Not "how are you?" Not "is that your kid?" It's just hey. Because anything else would have opened the floodgates and I wasn't sure. If I was ready to drown, she took a step closer. Can we talk?" I didn't know what to do. Every fiber in my body screamed at me to walk out, to keep the peace I had built, the quiet I had earned. But the look on her face wasn't one I recognized. Trina used to wear masks, sarcastic, bored, detached, but now there was no mask. She looked raw, tired, almost remorseful. I nodded once, wordlessly, like I was agreeing to something irreversible. She asked if we could sit in her car. It was parked just outside. She said her daughter, would fall asleep with her bottle. I followed her, still dazed, still saying nothing, just watching as she gently strapped the girl into her car seat. The kid looked at me and smiled. I smiled back, and something inside me cracked. Once we were sitting in the front seats with the engine humming and the baby babbling softly in the back, she finally turned to me. "I never thought I'd see you again," she said. "I almost didn't believe it was you. You look different." I muttered. "Yeah, life do that." She bit her lip, hesitated. Her name is Ivy. That answered one question, but not the one that mattered. I didn't ask who the father was. I didn't ask how long after our divorce she got pregnant. Didn't ask anything because I could already see the answer written across her face. It was complicated and probably not pretty. Then, after what felt like hours, she said something that punched the air right out of my lungs. "I didn't mean it when I told I didn't love you." I turned my head slowly, meeting her eyes for the first time in the conversation. "What?" She shook her head like she'd waited years to say this, and now hated how it sounded out loud. That night, the kitchen. "You heard me, didn't you?" I didn't reply. She didn't wait. I was angry, not at you, at myself. Felt stuck like I wasn't. The woman I wanted to be, and I blamed you for it because you were stable. You were good, and I wasn't. And instead of growing up, I just pushed you out. Silence. She went on after you left. I thought I'd feel free, but I felt hollow. It's like I carved out the one part of me that was real, and there was nothing left but noise. I thought time would fix that, but it didn't. I wanted to yell, to tell her she should have said all this 3 years ago, to ask her where the self-awareness had been when I cried myself to sleep in a room the size of a closet, wondering what I had done wrong. But instead all I said was, "Why now?" Her hands trembled slightly. "Because I saw you, and I knew if I didn't tell you the truth, I'd never forgive myself." I looked over at Ivy, peacefully asleep, completely unaware of the web of wreckage wrapped around her existence. That's when Trina dropped the final bombshell. She doesn't have a father. He left, said he wasn't ready. I've been raising her alone. And some nights, Emery, I lie awake thinking maybe I deserve that. My mouth went dry. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel bitter. I felt something worse, pity. And beneath that, something far more dangerous. Curiosity? I didn't respond. For a long time, I just sat there in the passenger seat of her car, surrounded by soft air freshener and the sound of Ivy's breathing. My fingers were stiff from clenching. My thoughts were a tornado. And yet I didn't move. I couldn't. Trina stared at the steering wheel, hands motionless in her lap. Her voice had cracked on the word deserved. And now she was doing that thing she always did when she felt exposed, pressing her thumbnail into her palm like she was trying to anchor herself in pain. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to say, "You think you deserved it? I begged you to talk to me. I gave you everything. And when you had the chance to be honest, you looked me in the eye and let me walk away like I was a utility bill you'd finally paid off. But instead, I stared out the window. 3 years. That's what lay between us. 3 years of silence. 3 years of not knowing who I was anymore. The fact that she was the one to break it, not with an apology, not with a letter, but with a face-to-face accidental encounter, made it all feel strangely unfinished. Eventually I asked, "What do you want from me?" Her answer came too fast. "I don't want anything." I looked at her hard. "Then why are you telling me this now?" She swallowed. "Because I don't want to rewrite history, but I want you to know you were never the problem." I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt something triumphant, some quiet, satisfying closure. But all I felt was tired, exhausted by the idea that only now, after years of healing by force, she decided to hand me the truth like it was some consolation prize. "I'm not the same guy anymore," I muttered. "I can see that," she said. "You look grounded, stronger." I hated that. I liked hearing that. And I hated even more that it made something warm stir in my chest. Like a part of me had been waiting for her to say those exact words. "You used to say I was too sensitive. I said that I took things too personally. You remember that?" She nodded. "Slowly, I do. I use that as a shield because if you were the one being emotional, I didn't have to deal with mine." We were quiet again. Ivy sighed in her sleep, clutching her bottle like it was a lifeline. And then Trina said something I didn't expect. Do you remember the night we danced in the kitchen? After the storm knocked the power out? I did. Of course I did. I remembered it in HD. We lit candles, poured wine, and slow danced to a song. We didn't know the lyrics too. It was the most honest moment we ever shared. Just two people wrapped in quiet, swaying in the dark like they still believed in forever. I think about that night a lot, she whispered. It was the last time I felt like I deserved you. The weight of those words hit me in the spine. I turned to her, genuinely confused. Then why do you throw it all away? Her answer came like a punch to the ribs, 'cause I thought I needed chaos to feel alive. There it was, the real confession, the truth beneath all her surface-level regrets and tidy explanations. She didn't leave because I was boring. She left because I was stable, safe, predictable. Predictable, and for someone like her, someone addicted to emotional turbulence. Love without pain felt flat. I felt a flicker of anger then because I wasn't a phase. I wasn't an experiment in emotional restraint. I was a man who loved her deeply. I deserved more than a late apology in a car outside a takeout place. I'm not your safety net, Trina, I said, barely holding my voice steady. And I'm not the guy you get to come back to when the world finally scares you. She nodded again, this time slower, like she understood what I meant, maybe more than I did. I know. I wanted you to hear it from me before you heard it from someone else. That stopped me. What does that mean? Her eyes darted briefly to the rear-view mirror, then back to me. Just promise me you'll keep an open mind if something surfaces. People might say things. People talk. What people? She hesitated. There were complications with my ex, with Ivy's birth, with everything. Just promise me you'll remember what I told you today. The way her voice dropped chilled me because this wasn't just a confessional anymore. This was a warning. I suddenly realized the story I thought had ended 3 years ago. It hadn't even started yet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the cheap ceiling fan above me groaning with every spin, and her voice kept looping in my head. People might say things. Complications. Promise me you'll remember what I told you today. What was that supposed to mean? People. What was she afraid I'd hear? It felt like she cracked open a door, gave me just enough light to know I was in a different room, and then slammed it shut again. I tossed and turned for hours, my mind running in circles, not just about her, but about Ivy. That little girl had my nose, my ears, my damn smile. And the worst part was, once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. By morning, curiosity had already begun eating at me like rust. I told myself I wasn't going to get involved. I wasn't going to dig into her life or go chasing ghosts. True. Then why did I open my old storage box and pull out the manila envelope labeled divorce finalization? Why did I start reading through it again like some desperate amateur detective? Everything looked normal at first. Standard filings, my signature, her signature, but then stapled near the back, a page I barely remembered. A note from her lawyer referencing prenatal health insurance adjustments. That stopped me cold. I read it again. Prenatal. But she never told me she was pregnant. Not once. Never hinted. Never even let it slip. I closed the folder and just sat there, my fingers tingling. I'd been sleepwalking through that entire divorce. I was too emotionally wrecked to ask questions, too heartbroken to look at details. I let her take the house, the furniture, even the damn espresso machine without protest. And now, sitting in my too small apartment 3 years later, I realized I might have missed something far more important. I needed answers, but not from her. Not yet. Instead, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly 2 years. Her sister, Hi, picked up after 4 rings, her voice instantly weary. Emery? Hi. Yeah, a weird question, but do you have a minute? She was quiet for a moment. Is this about Trina? My pulse quickened. Why would you assume that? 'Cause she called me yesterday? Hi said. Said she ran into you? She was rattled. Rattled? How? She said she told you the truth, or some of it. made my throat dry. Some of it high-sighed on the other end. Listen, I don't want to get between you two, but if she hasn't told you everything yet, it's not my place. Harry, I said, my voice firmer than I expected. Was Ivy born before or after the divorce? Another pause, and then, Emery, you should really talk to Trina about this. I gritted my teeth. It's not an answer. She didn't tell you? Ellie asked. A little too surprised. She swore she was going to. My voice cracked. So she was pregnant when she left me. Hi let out a shaky breath. Yes, but it's not what you think. I leaned against the kitchen counter, barely able to stand. Then what is it? There was a long silence before she said something that hit me like a hammer to the chest. Emery, Trina, doesn't know for sure who the father is. My brain went numb. She what? She was seeing someone toward the end of your marriage? She told me it didn't mean anything, that it was over, that she was just trying to feel something. You were drifting. Apart and she panicked, made bad choices, and she found out she was pregnant after you moved out. The timing was close. She said she thought about telling you, but she didn't want to trap you with uncertainty. Couldn't breathe. So instead, she let me walk away thinking I was the problem, that I wasn't enough. She was scared. Hai said quietly, but yes, she should. Have told you? My legs gave out, and I slid to the floor. The cold tile against my back doing nothing to stop the heat that surged through my face and chest. This wasn't just betrayal, it was theft. She'd stolen my right to know, my right to decide, my right to be a father. If that's even what I was, I hung up without another word. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt something stronger. Then sadness. I felt rage. But not the loud, explosive kind. The quiet, calculating kind. The kind that simmers behind your ribs and whispers. She doesn't get to keep this secret anymore. I'd spent 3 years rebuilding my life with duct tape and denial. Now it was time to rip off the seal. It's a strange thing realizing your entire past may be a lie or worse, just a version of the truth someone else decided you deserved. I didn't leave my apartment that night. Didn't eat. Didn't sleep. I just sat there, cross-legged on the kitchen floor, like a man waiting for a phone that would never ring. Going over every conversation, every detail, every offhand moment from our last year together, suddenly, it all felt suspicious. Her late nights at work, the way she'd snap when I asked simple questions, her always locking her phone, the way she used to hesitate just for a second when I said I loved her. I had dismissed those things, chalked them up to stress to life to, this is what marriage looks like when you're not 25 anymore. But now I knew better. Now I knew I was just the guy she kept on standby while chasing a life she wasn't even brave enough to admit she wanted. The next morning, I walked straight into a drugstore and bought a paternity test. Just like that, no hesitation. I didn't even feel ashamed, which for me was unusual. I've lived most of my life steeped in self-blame. But that morning, as I stood in line holding that little kit like it was a loaded weapon, I didn't feel weak. I felt something else. Like I was finally taking back a piece of my own story. Of course, I couldn't exactly walk up to Trina's house and swab the kid's mouth, so I texted her. Just one sentence. Need to talk somewhere private. She replied within minutes. Gave me an address. Said Ivy would be with Hai for a few hours. I drove there without music, gripping the steering wheel. So hard my knuckles hurt. My hands were shaking. Not from nerves, but from the weight of a question I wasn't sure I wanted the answer to. She opened the door before I even knocked. She looked different this time. No makeup, no pretenses. Just Trina, tired, raw, and real. For the first time in years, she looked like someone who had been living with consequences, not just creating. Them. Come in, she said. Her voice didn't carry the sharp edge it used to. It was softer, but not weak. More like someone who had stopped pretending to be unbreakable. I stepped inside. She led me to the kitchen. The same model of the espresso machine I once gave up in the divorce sat quietly in the corner. I glanced at it, and she noticed. I never used it, she said. It just sits there. I nodded, but said nothing. My focus wasn't on the past anymore. It was on the box in my jacket pocket. I pulled it out and laid it on the table between us. Her face drained of color. Emery, I need to know, I said quietly. I'm not asking to punish you. I'm not here to make a scene, but if there's even the slightest chance that Ivy is mine, I deserve to know." She closed her eyes for a second, then opened them again. "Okay," she said. "Okay, I'll get a sample. I want to do it myself," I added. "No games?" She nodded, and for a moment I thought she might cry. But instead, she turned and left the room. A few minutes later, she came back with a small cotton swab in a sealed bag. "Help me do it this morning," she said. I knew you'd ask. I stared at her. "So why didn't you just tell me the truth before?" She looked down at her hands. "'Cause I wasn't sure what the truth was, and because I was scared. I still am." That was the first honest thing I believed she'd said in years. I took the sample, packed it up with the kit. She offered to pay for half the test. I refused. "If this is what I think it is," I said, "you've already taken enough." The next 5 days were torture. I went to work, went through the motions, but my mind was nowhere near spreadsheets and morning meetings. It was trapped in those seconds when I saw Ivy's eyes that mirrored mine just a little too closely. Then the email came. I clicked the link, hands trembling, and there it was. Probability of paternity, 97%. My heart stopped. I read it again and again. I couldn't believe it. I was a father. I'd been a father for 3 years, and no one told me. I dropped my head into my hands and cried, not just from pain, but from the ache of lost time, from the thought of 3 birthdays I never celebrated, 3 Christmases I never got to ruin with oversized toys, 3 years of her first words, her first steps, her first everything, all gone, stolen. Not by fate, not by accident, but by choice. Trina's choice. But this time, the decision of what came next, that was mine. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. I sat at the edge of my bed with the paternity results still glowing on my screen, my thumb hovering over the forward button like I needed permission to send the truth.
Oh.
I never did. I never sent it because some truths aren't meant to be delivered. Through a screen, they need to be spoken out loud. Not for drama, not for confrontation, but because they weigh too much to be typed. At 6:42 a.m., MI was already in the car. I had no plan, no speech prepared. I just knew one thing. I needed to look Trina in the eyes and ask her how in God's name she had decided I didn't deserve to know my own child. When she opened the door, her face told me everything. She already knew. Whether she had taken the same test behind my back or just sensed it all along, I couldn't tell. But her eyes dropped to the envelope in my hand before I even spoke. "She's mine," I said. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, her arms folding like she needed to keep herself from falling apart. I know. The silence between us cracked like ice. I waited for her to say something, anything, an apology, an explanation, a reason. But what I got instead was the quiet confession of a woman who had already rehearsed every line and still knew none of them would land softly. "I wanted to tell you 100 times," she said, "but I was afraid you'd hate me." I stepped forward. "I already did, Trina. I hated you for years. For how you looked at me like I was furniture. For the way you shut down instead of speaking up. For how you smiled at strangers but couldn't even say goodnight to me anymore. But this I held up. The envelope. This isn't about hate. It's about a little girl who doesn't even know her father's name. She calls someone else daddy sometimes," she whispered. "He's not around anymore. But when she watches cartoons, she points at the screen and says daddy like it's a game." My heart broke in half. "Why didn't you tell her?" "'Cause I didn't know. If I could handle what would happen if you said you didn't want to be part of her life." I stared at her, stunned. "So, your solution was to erase me entirely? To build a version of her world where I didn't even exist?" She didn't respond. She just looked down, shame clinging to her like fog. "I missed her first birthday, Trina. Her first steps, her first everything. Do you understand that?" Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't care. Not right then, not after. What I'd lost. "I mourn the idea of being a father because you let me believe it would never happen. All along, she was right there." "I know," she whispered. No, you don't, I snapped. You can't. Then she said something I wasn't prepared for. Do you want to meet her? Everything in me stopped. She's upstairs, she added, still sleeping. I was shaking. I felt like a stranger in my own life. A part of me wanted to turn around, walk out, rebuild from a distance. But the other part, the part that had spent 3 years living in a shell, knew this was a moment I'd never forgive myself for walking away from. I don't want her to be confused, I said. If I come in, I'm not going anywhere again. You understand? Trina nodded. I want that. I think she deserves that. We walked upstairs together, slow and silent. Every step felt like a crack in a dam that had been holding back to many years of pain. The door to her room was slightly ajar, pink light pouring through the blinds. Inside, Ivy slept curled up in a sea of stuffed animals, her little chest rising and falling in a rhythm that nearly made me cry on sight. Trina knelt beside the bed and gently rubbed her back. Sweetheart, she whispered. Someone's here to meet you. Ivy stirred, blinked, and looked up at me with those same eyes I saw in the mirror every morning. For a moment, she just stared, that curious toddler stare, unfiltered and raw. Then she smiled. Hi, that one word shattered me. I dropped to my knees. Hi, I said, my voice already breaking. I've waited so long to say that to you. She giggled and reached out to hand me a little blue plush rabbit. I took it with trembling hands. That morning I didn't just meet my daughter. I met a version of myself I thought had died, who still believed he had something left to give. But nothing in this world comes back clean. Nothing rewinds without cost. And just when I thought the worst of it was over, something else surfaced. Something Trina never planned to tell me. The morning I met Ivy was the first time in years that I felt like time paused for the right reasons. After she handed me that little blue rabbit, she didn't say much, just kept watching me, tilting her head, blinking those same long lashes I recognized from old family photos of myself. She had my nose, Trina's chin, and something else in her, something I couldn't put into words. We didn't need words. She climbed into my lap like she'd done it 1,000 times before. No fear, no hesitation, as if some part of her had always been waiting for me too. I stayed for hours. We ate cereal together at the tiny table in the corner of the kitchen. She insisted on pouring the milk herself. It splashed everywhere and I laughed and Trina laughed too, but I think her laugh came more from nervousness than joy. She kept watching me like she expected me to vanish or explode. Maybe both. I helped Ivy build a block tower in the living room, while Trina stood back, watching silent, unsure of where to place herself in this new scene she never thought would exist. I didn't blame her for that part. It was complicated. We were building something out of years of silence, regret, and loss. There was no guidebook for this. Later that afternoon, Ivy went down for a nap, and I stood up to leave. I didn't want to, but I needed space. Not from her, but from the heaviness of it all. I told Trina I'd call. She nodded and walked me to the door. For the first time, she looked unsure of what to say. You were good with her, she said softly. I've been good with a lot of things, I replied, but you didn't give me a chance. She looked like she wanted to argue but couldn't. I left, but fate apparently wasn't done with me yet. That night, I got a call from Hi. I was surprised she'd been quiet since our last conversation. Her voice sounded different this time, tense, rushed. I need to give you something, she said. I probably should have done this years ago, but I didn't know what to do with it. I think you're finally ready, she wouldn't explain over the phone. Told me to meet her at her place. When I got there, she handed me a leather-bound journal wrapped in a plastic bag. It was worn, its edges torn like it had been carried everywhere, but opened rarely. She left it at my house just after the divorce. Hi said she didn't want to throw it away, but couldn't bear to read it. I didn't either, but something tells me you should. I took it home, sat on the couch, stared at it for 20 minutes before opening it. The first few pages were filled with scattered thoughts, scribbled frustrations, half-hearted poetry. I almost gave up until I hit an entry dated just 4 days before she filed for divorce. I think I'm pregnant. I haven't told Emery. I'm not even sure it's his. But part of me hopes it is, because if it is, Maybe I won't feel so guilty about how badly I've hurt him. I stopped breathing. I flipped the page. He's been so kind lately, making me coffee, offering to do my laundry. I can't look him in the eye. He doesn't know. I cheated. Not once. Not even just with one person. So it wasn't physical at first. It started with messages, then drinks, then lies. I thought it would fill whatever was empty inside me. It didn't. Now I'm just empty and a coward. I sat frozen. My stomach turned. The weight of the journal on my lap might as well have been a cinder block. She hadn't just made one mistake. She hadn't just left because we were drifting apart. She had been living two lives, one with me, one in secret, and then fled before she had to reconcile them. I kept reading. If it is his baby, maybe that means I wasn't all bad. Maybe a part of me still wanted to be with him. But I can't face him now. I can't stand the look he'd give me if he ever knew. Page after page, regret, confusion, nothing about love, nothing about trying, just guilt and fear. I closed the journal, tears stinging the corners of my eyes. She never planned to tell me. She had been ready to erase the truth, to raise our daughter in a carefully curated world where my role was permanently absent, all to avoid facing the consequence of her own unraveling. I looked at the clock. Midnight. I should have gone to bed, but instead I called Trina. She picked up on the second ring. "Emery, I read it," I said, "the journal. Silence. Ivy's mine, and I will be in her life. But you and I were never. Going back to what we were ever. Do you understand that?" "Yes," she whispered. "I'll be a father," I said, "but not your second chance." And I meant it, because love can survive almost anything except betrayal that hides behind silence. 3 weeks passed after that night. Quiet ones. No screaming, no drawn-out fights, no dramatic scenes, just space, the kind that allows wounds to breathe. I didn't speak to Trina for a few days after our call. I needed to let the gravity of it all settle. I needed to remember who I was before her lies and who I could still be in the wake of them. But one thing never wavered: my commitment to Ivy. From the moment I knew she was mine, everything changed. Suddenly, all the pain, all the years I'd spent blaming myself, unraveling in silence, hiding in therapy rooms, pretending I wasn't hollow, it all had context. It all had meaning. I hadn't lost everything. I found someone I never knew I had. My daughter. The first weekend after everything came out, I took Ivy to the zoo. It was a small place, but she talked about it like we were heading into another galaxy. She held my hand the whole time, pointed at everything, fed goats, mimicked monkey noises, and asked me if we could come back every day forever. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because hearing her voice say, "We," made my chest ache in the best possible way. We got ice cream on the way home. She smeared chocolate across her face, and I handed her napkins one after another. But she just kept smiling through it, proud of the mess. That's when she called me Dad for the first time. Not Emery, not Mister, just Dad. I didn't react right away. I couldn't. My brain short-circuited. Then I nodded, smiled back, and said, "Yeah, sweetie," like it was the most normal thing in the world. But inside, I was a hurricane of every emotion I'd buried for years. Trina stayed true to her word. She didn't interfere. She didn't try to mend things between us or confuse Ivy with stories about our past. She respected the boundaries I set. She even sent me a handwritten note a few days later. One I still haven't thrown away. It said, "You are always the better person. Thank you for being the father she deserves, even when I didn't deserve you." I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because this wasn't about her anymore. It was about building something new. A few months later, I filed for official custody rights. Joined at first to keep things stable, but I moved to a bigger apartment. One with a real room for Ivy. I painted the walls soft yellow and let her choose bed sheets with little suns and clouds. She started calling it Daddy's Sky Room. We made pancakes every Sunday. She burned most of them, but we ate them anyway. I started journaling again, not out of pain, but gratitude. I even opened up to a few friends I'd shut out during the divorce. I told them the truth, all of it. 4. The first time in forever, I didn't feel embarrassed. I felt rebuilt. Ivy turned for the spring. We threw a small party in the park. I watched her run across the grass, chasing bubbles, laughing like there was no weight in the world. And I realized something. She didn't just save me from my past, she gave me a future. One that wasn't haunted by the memory of a failed marriage or the echo of things left unsaid. But one filled with bedtime stories, school drawings, and little hands reaching for mine in parking lots. So here's the truth. I lost a wife, but I found a daughter. And in the end, I think I came out ahead because now, for the first time in my life,